Save the Semantics, episode 300. It is March 19th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Wednesday afternoon/evening. Don't really have anything particularly special for 300. It feels like kind of like, momentous sort of thing. Honestly, I don't remember if I really did anything for like 200 either, so it's just going to be the same old, right? Maybe once I hit like a particular landmark or sort of a particular benchmark, whatever, I think maybe it's worthwhile to do something a little bit special in a way, but right now is not, timing wise is not exactly the best, and I still would like to kind of continue to just sort of put stuff out when I'm able to. So yeah, just a regular old episode today. But again, maybe later down the line if I hit a particular time, you know what I mean, date, who knows. But yeah, it's been a busy week per usual over the last couple of months. I am tired. I'm a little tired today, so just if you can tell, I might be a little out of it. I have not really had the chance to catch up on too many games recently, just haven't had the time to squeeze those in. I did watch the highlights of the Bucks Warriors game from yesterday, in which the Warriors won, which I was very happy to see. A very good bounce back win after their pretty disappointing loss against the Jokic-less Nuggets. So a nice bounce back win there. Really, it was just a lot of like, from kind of the clips that I saw, a lot of it was just like the defense was quite good yesterday. Without Steph. Steph was not playing. He was out for rest. He has this kind of like lingering back issue, which is, obviously something to keep note of moving forward. But they were able to take care of business. Draymond had some exceptional defensive moments against Giannis. Like he was just really completely stalling whatever Giannis was doing, and that was pretty impressive. Moses Moody was also doing a pretty good job against Damian Lillard as well. It ended up being a fairly, not like a blowout, but a decent kind of comfortable sort of win ultimately, which is great to see. We like to see that kind of result at the end of the day. I think the defense improving significantly has been one of the more impactful things that I've seen so far from Jimmy's his emergence on this team. You can pinpoint the offense obviously and how he helps kind of space, provide levity for Steph by being the kind of ball handler while Steph is moving off ball, right? That's just kind of the danger of Steph Curry. But defensively, they've just been, it's been looking really good. Moses Moody has just been really turning it up on defense. He's just completely just transformed in a way where this is kind of the guy that you, if you are a Warriors fan, have been really hoping to see for the last like couple of seasons, right? This 3-and-D type of player, and he's really kind of come out over the course of however long it's been since the trade deadline as one of those impactful players, and it's been really awesome to see that. I think it's also worth mentioning that the kind of the Pods, Jimmy connection, which I talked about, earlier on in kind of the first like 10 or so games with Jimmy. That was kind of a clear thing. From what I saw, there was some of that carried on yesterday as well. You saw Jimmy kind of sort of passing up to Pajemski so that he could get his shot up. Just kind of helping him build confidence in his shot, right? If he's able to be a consistent three-point shooter and a threat from beyond the arc, I think he will be a pretty significant part of the rotation, and I think that it kind of gives a little bit more weight to him being a successful NBA player moving forward, right? Maybe not just within the Warriors kind of ecosystem. Obviously, like right now, I think it's working really well because of, he's sort of bought into what they have going, right? But outside of that, it's like maybe he might work out well as kind of like maybe a secondary ball handler type of player, right? But he's had some nice moments as well, so that's been good to see. Yesterday was a bit just kind of doing a little bit of scoreboard watching, right? Obviously, it's not the best to do because it doesn't give the whole story. But Kuminga didn't have the best game, it seemed like. His shooting splits were just not very good, and just not a very impactful game yesterday. I think that those are just going to kind of come if he is able to sort of mold his game a little bit more in the style of Jimmy, where he is smart about the shots that he takes, the fouls that he's able to draw up, and then obviously maybe some of his ball handling, which is kind of one of his biggest weaknesses. If he's able to kind of improve in those things little by little, he's still young, man. He's still a really young player. He's 21, 22. There are rookies in the league that are older than him. So it's like he just, I think, needs to be given... I think there needs to obviously be a leash of sorts, or, just given a bit of a, hey, listen, if this isn't your night, then we kind of have to pull you back. Maybe in a similar sense to a Buddy Hield, right? Obviously with Buddy, his function is really just being a offensive 3-point threat. Although he did have some nice, I do remember seeing some nice defense. He can really be not a good defender, but he can absolutely put in the effort, right? If he is locked in, I think it just kind of comes with him also being able to score as well. So if he is able to score, it kind of translates to him being motivated on the defensive end. So, but in the case of Kuminga, the hope is that he is able to be a more consistent threat from on the offensive end and also be a factor on the defensive end. He just has the athleticism and the tools to be able to do that. It's just a matter of just just growing his basketball IQ and making the right decisions, because he does have moments, from what I remember, not just from yesterday's game, but just over the course of this season, where he is just trying to force the ball by going downhill, or he's just taking an ill-advised shot because it's kind of given to him, right? Because he is just not at all a threat from three. So it's you got to be able to kind of utilize what works best for you. Maybe sort of mold it into maybe kind of a Giannis type sort of play style. Maybe a little less finesse, if you want to call it that. But he's strong enough and he's athletic enough to be a impactful player on the offensive side. So he's had some good games, since he's come back. Just yesterday, I think, was maybe I don't want to say regression because it's just one game, but it's a reflection that he still has maybe a bit of a ways to go until being kind of molded into a much more all-around player. And you never know. He might just never get to that point. I know that some people, including some of my friends, they're not fans of Kuminga. They're ready to move off. I think I still have a little bit of faith because he has shown flashes of being a potentially important player. We just need to see it, man. We just need to be able to see it. When it comes to playoffs, I don't know, is he going to be impactful? Is he going to have a significant, rotational. Is he going to be a significant rotational piece in the playoffs? We'll see, man. I think it is good to have like some athletic, forward to be able to both be just kind of like a deterrent as a defensive player, and then also just kind of be kind of this bowling ball on offense, right? And draw fouls and in a bit more of a smarter way, in a similar sense to like Jimmy, right? Like if he's able to just kind of replicate some of that and, in his just sort of his stature, I think it would be great for the Warriors. But yeah, he is just kind of some struggles here and there, but that's sort of expected. He doesn't have to carry like the secondary offensive load anymore. I think that was some of the expectation with earlier in the season before the trade, where it was like Steph needed some help because nobody else was like contributing. Now that has been alleviated. I think Kuminga no longer has to have that pressure of needing to create if he's able to kind of do things off ball and also just move down to the basket with his strength and when that's needed. Just finding some kind of balance there. He doesn't need to be the top scorer in a series, but if he could be, I don't know, if he could be like the top scorer during a game in like the playoffs or something, that would be great to see. If nobody else is hitting, maybe people aren't exactly, factoring in that he could be, a potential factor in the series, like I said, some kind of X factor. I don't know. We will see, because I think he will be very useful in certain matchups where you could use some youth and some athleticism. So I would like to see him succeed, because then it would also benefit the Warriors as well, obviously. Today we got a bigger slate of games. Yesterday was just like 4 games or something like that. Today we got much more. I took like a brief look. None of the matchups really caught my eye, to be honest. They all seemed pretty, it's just like, all right, it's like good team versus bad team versus bad team. Like nothing really stood out to me. So we'll see if I don't know, maybe I'll tune into some of them. But the Warriors take on the Raptors tomorrow. That should be a win, but listen, every game, you just can't. The Nuggets game should have been a win, but they kind of took their foot off the gas and maybe were a little less concentrated on that. Maybe they just sort of wrote them off because Jokic and Jamal Murray weren't playing, but I just can't do that. Can't do that, man. You can't do that. So hopefully they don't do that tomorrow's game against the Raptors. The Raptors, as I've talked about, are very, very serious about their tanking. They are absolutely tanking. I mean, you could probably continue to see almost like half of their rotation on the injury list. I don't, who knows if like Scotty Barnes or like Jakob Poeltl play. Like, I don't know, man. It feels like it might be a game against a bunch of G Leaguers. Maybe that gives like opportunity for Steph to rest even further, along with maybe Jimmy or Draymond. Like, I don't know, man. Like maybe I'm hoping that this could be a blowout so that nobody has to really put in a lot of minutes. They should really be able to take care of business. The Raptors also want to be taken care of, so they have better draft lottery odds. So yeah, I think that this would be benefit. Listen, this is like a, kind of like a under the table handshake type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, listen, just let it happen. We know what you guys want. Like, we know that you guys are gunning for, like a top 5 right now. You're kind of in a bit of a rut there, up against the Nets and the Sixers. So this will be beneficial to you if you lose this one. So yeah, just a little, it's a win-win for both teams in a way, if they do lose. Tomorrow, along with the Warriors game, tomorrow is when the NCAA tournament starts, which I did fill out a March Madness bracket, kind of along with my my coworkers. I know nothing for the most part, like outside of the lottery pick names of like a Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. Now this guy named VJ Edgecombe has kind of like sort of come onto the scene as well as like a potential top 5 pick name. But like outside of those, like I have no idea. Maybe I've had moments where I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll invest in watching college basketball. The one year that I do remember that I was watching a bit more, like with a concentrated effort, was when UConn went to. I mean, UConn has gone to the final. I mean, they won last year, right? But I remember this one. This was like 2011 because it was Kemba Walker and Jeremy Lamb, I think, that were a part of like the championship team. I remember that very vividly. I remember Kemba having just like an awesome tournament run and everything like that. That was like the last one that I remember quite, like vividly in my memory. Everything else is just kind of a blur. I'm like, who won that year? Like, what, did Duke win again? Oh, Duke hasn't won in like quite a while. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I don't remember like who is. I don't remember the winners. I kind of forget who's like good most of the time. I look at like these, and now as I was looking over the bracket, I was just like, I feel like I'm picking top seeds in a lot of these when maybe it's more fun to try to assume that there will be like an upset. You know what I mean? I ended up taking Baylor to win it all just because I like the name VJ Edgecombe. It's a sick name. It's a dope name. And he's going to be an NBA prospect. So I'm like, all right, cool, man. I have no idea if they're really actually that good. They're like a 9th seed in the tournament. So I don't think that's very high. But still, I'm just like, you know what? Maybe he's going to carry. Also Cooper Flag, I remember seeing that he did go down with like an ankle injury. I don't know if he's going to play. Like, is he going to play in the tournament or is he out? You know what I mean? Does that drop his, position in the draft at all? Or do people just not care about that kind of thing? I have no idea, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to kind of see. I don't know if I'm going to be like tuned in to watch college basketball. Maybe if like none of the NBA games I'm watching are very interesting, right? Obviously, like high stakes basketball leads to more, just like more like potentially exciting situations, right? Single elimination games, all that stuff, which I've talked about. The basketball itself, right? You're gonna see a lot of players missing shots, and they're very low scoring games too, in a way. Not because like the defense is particularly great, but because people just cannot make a shot. So the quality in between college, I think, and as I've become a lot more accustomed to watching just basketball in general, the quality of play between college and professional, the NBA, is quite staggering. It is quite the talent gap between them and the skill gap, right? But regardless of that, like, I don't think most people are really I'm not like a NBA snob by any means, right? I just have not found college basketball to be the most engaging necessarily, right? I just think that it can be exciting when it comes down to the wire, and there's just, there's like a upset. There's more chance of an upset by a lower seeded team because it is a single game, right? So that's kind of where the excitement is. But just a lot of basketball though. So I'll check it out. I'll definitely check out, things if anything catches my interest. I generally do prioritize watching just NBA basketball, especially now considering kind of the stakes leading up to the playoffs. But hey, maybe there is like a game or something that catches my eye. Maybe there's like a potential prospect on one of these teams that people are talking about. I'm like, all right, let's see what this guy's about. and maybe that is something kind of worthwhile to check out, see what a potential prospect looks like and what they look like on the court, how that might potentially translate to their play in the NBA. There's a lot to kind of think about, and especially just based on how sort of hyped this draft class is going to be, with obviously Cooper Flag at the top there. But I'm very interested. I think just hearing some of the reports and stuff, I do want to see how some of these guys perform. Unfortunately, and this is something that just kind of I just sort of realized, two of like the top prospects in Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, both of those guys are on the same team, which is Rutgers. They're not in the tournament. So like I feel like I can't really give a good assessment of those guys. Like, I don't know. It's like, am I gonna go back and watch their tape like before? Like, no, I don't. I'm not that dedicated. Maybe I'll check it out, but I don't know. It is interesting though, right? It's just like, but I think based on what I've heard, those two guys, if they are placed in a situation that is surrounded by good talent, then it will allow them to maybe thrive in those sort of situations. Unfortunately for them, they are the best players on a not so good team. But it's like, I don't know. It's so interesting, right? Like, it's like, how do you, if they're not on a very good team, like, doesn't that kind of reflect their play as well? But I guess if you are just drafting for like individual talent, I guess those two guys is like athleticism and those kinds of things and shot making, whatever, is very high. So just because of that, like, I think a lot of teams, or sort of draft people that are sort of a lot more invested in the draft have a pretty high opinion of those two players. But I do think it is fascinating, right? Like, I don't, in most situations, I feel it's like you would generally want to draft a player from like a good team, but I guess that's not really the case, right? I mean, Wembanyama was playing in France right before he got drafted. Scoot Henderson was playing in the G League, so I guess it's not really a given nowadays that the best player is going to be on the best team. I think we're sort of in a different era from when it was before. Like Zion, Zion was a huge sort of phenomenon when he was at Duke and everything. But that was just a different time. I think, I don't know. I guess you could argue that players like Kobe Bryant and LeBron were both drafted out of high school, right? That's not really a thing anymore. So I guess maybe that's sort of just the exception to a lot of that. But I don't know. I'm just I have no sense of like how the drafting and how you sort of comb through information regarding certain players and how you determine that they are going to be a good NBA player, right? I understand in the case of someone like a Wembanyama, obviously, because of just the way in you can just watch, you could just watch him play when he was in France and when he was playing for the French league. It's just like what he was able to do and what kind of player he was. Like, you're like, all right, yeah, bring him over, man. Like, you've never seen anything like that before. But that's, I don't know. In other cases, it's like, okay, I don't know. It's hard to really say. And I mean, and players are sometimes, they do become busts. They do become NBA busts because they just do not work well within the NBA sort of environment. The NBA game doesn't suit to their play style or whatever, right? What worked in college isn't going to work in the NBA because of the level of play and everything like that, right? So I think that I guess it's I don't know, it's probably not an easy thing to just draft and to look over all of these players like data and really make a clear determination of where they're going to end up, because ultimately you don't really know for the most part, right? You're like, oh, this for sure is going to be a great player. I don't know. Just like Wembanyama, sure. Zion, obviously you just not looking at his injury history or anything, he still is really good. And he's had like a nice run over the course of the last couple of months. But like outside of those kind of unicorn prospects, like, I don't know, man, there's a lot of cases where it just doesn't really work out for those players because they just do not fit well in the NBA game. So yeah, I don't know, that might be kind of like the next step for my bettering my understanding of the NBA and just basketball in general, is having a better sense of what like draft, what are people called that do, that do like those assessments for draft prospects. What are they called? Like, is there a title for those guys? But like for those types of like people that are scouters, right? People that look at certain players and they're able to kind of get a sense of everything, their physicality, the way they move, the way, their efficiency, all of those things, right? I think that is kind of the more higher level and more in detail kind of thing that I just am not really, I have not really gotten to, I don't know if I ever will, because I just don't really care all that much about college basketball in a way, right? But I do think that it is maybe good to have a more clear understanding of, how players get scouted, what is sort of given to them, determined to like, for them to be a potentially good, like NBA, like people have scouted Cooper Flagg since he was like 16, right? Like there was already like rumblings of this guy, and obviously now he's at Duke. There's a lot more fervor, and now he's projected to be the number one pick in the NBA draft next season, or for this upcoming draft. So that kind of is a lot more of a case of word of mouth and that kind of thing. But like in the earlier stages, it's like, how do you really determine that? Is it just the play style of it, all of these things? Like, I don't know. It's a lot to consider, and maybe that's something that's worth looking into. I do remember like a while back there was this one video. It was like a scout video on like a particular player. I don't remember. It didn't have that many views. It was like maybe like a few thousand views or something like that. But it was really interesting. Like the scout he's like the YouTuber. He was essentially just kind of talking about really specific details about this player's plays and like what he's good at and what he's not good at. It's like, oh, he doesn't get low enough to the ground so that he can move quickly, or he just doesn't have like the foot speed to catch up with his defenders. His shot is, he has like a consistent shot, but it has like a bit of a hitch. So it's like it's not gonna really translate to him being able to get his shot off well and quickly. So it's like all of these little things to take into account to determine whether this player is good and can fit into, I don't know, fit on a roster, become a successful player, all of those things. So there's so much that goes into it, even just from my very brief kind of interaction with that type of content, if you want to call it that, or just that type of reporting. So I don't know how much I can get into the weeds of that. But it is interesting. It is definitely fascinating to see just how much they look into a player and that kind of thing. It's funny too, because you as a maybe casual viewer, I'm also talking about myself, because I still consider myself very much a casual viewer. I don't look super in depth at basketball, right? I'm working towards that. I'm trying to be a little better about that so I can, provide a more, a better and more knowledgeable response to certain things, and not just, I don't know, not become a type of person that just sort of spits out rhetoric from mainstream media. You know what I mean? I think that as I was saying, I think the way in which I sort of have looked at players, and I think this is a case for most people, it's like, whoa, look how tall this guy is. He's going to be really good. Like, whoa, look at, how like strong and how fast they are. It's like, that's going to be, he's going to be awesome in the NBA. I mean, and sometimes that's the case, right? Sometimes you just get one of those players that turn out to just have this insane athleticism that nobody else has, right? And it's like very clear that it's just like, oh, even just like a normal person watching that would be like, nobody else plays like them. But like I remember when the Warriors had draft combines, and I was paying attention to those because, earlier on, and, kind of the 2010s, 2009, 2010s era, I was just like, dude, who are they going to get in the draft? Who are they going to get in the draft? And I remember they were running kind of like, these sort of combines or these workouts with potential prospects and that kind of thing. And I remember watching, seeing, the way they played or the way they looked, or just, maybe they had like little kind of, maybe like a beat reporter was, kind of interviewing that. I was like, dude, that guy is going to be something, right? I can't even really remember the names of these players because they didn't turn out to be really significant, players, right? But it's like, I'm simply basing, at that time, I was simply basing that they could be a contributor to a team, when it was just like, you were just simply basing how they were playing off of like a workout. It's just like, it's like, of course they're going to look good in practice. Like, that was a whole meme with Ben Simmons where he, like, and this has been kind of the case over the years, where people have made fun of him because of his, his practice workouts have kind of, get posted on Twitter and stuff like that. And it's always like, oh, he's shooting threes and he's he's dunking, and it's like, yeah, but you don't see any of that in the games, right? And he's clearly, taken a step back following his injury, and then on top of that, probably whatever else he was, kind of dealing with, which I think is fair. But it's also like, you can't really give a fair judgment on what he is as a player based on practice footage, right? And that was kind of the case of me when I was younger, watching all of these potential prospects practice with the Warriors, and me being like, oh shit, this guy looks, you know what I mean? It's really hard to say, because even me, like, I'll be very honest. When they drafted Klay Thompson, I was like, I don't really, I mean, he's like a taller dude, I guess, but it's like nothing from what I've seen from him is like really impressed me. You know what I mean? Because I didn't watch him play like college basketball or anything. I watched like maybe some of his like, draft workouts or pre-draft workouts, and I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, okay, he's not like that impressive because he was still skinny at the time. And I don't know, he just wasn't like the coolest looking player, you know what I mean? It turned out I was completely wrong. It's just like, you don't know anything. Like, you just don't know. Like, I especially didn't know at that time, and he turned out to be, obviously we all know where that went, but it's just like, it's funny looking back on that, be like, oh, I mean, I was like excited because like other people were excited, but inside I was like, I don't really see it. And it turned out to be awesome. So it's funny how those things kind of work out. But yeah, maybe that is something to consider and kind of look into more, especially, once the like postseason kind of, just sort of is over, once the playoffs and the finals are over. That might be something that I might take some time to look into if I am interested in being like, okay, all these young players, like, I mean, that is going to be after the draft as well. So, that might be something to kind of, to really, be interested in. So I'm putting a little checkbox there for that. Maybe looking at, a bit more of taking a closer look at, how draft prospects are kind of viewed through the lens of scouts and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's been, I haven't really had the chance to really watch a lot of anything, honestly. Again, maybe I'll catch some basketball later tonight, but we'll see about that. There's not really a ton of super interesting games or anything. I think I'll do a little split here. I won't post this directly. I'll do a combined episode this week. Depending on just timing and everything, maybe I'll record in the next couple of days or this weekend, which, by the way, this weekend, Friday, Xenoblade Chronicles X is coming out, and I can't believe it's right there. It's right here, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I'm probably also going to pick up a new Joy-Con because I kind of messed up my other Joy-Con, which is just like the most predictable thing ever. And it's so funny considering that the Switch 2 is going to come pretty soon. It's just like, all right, maybe it is time. Maybe it is time to upgrade. But for the time being, hopefully I can find like a decently priced Joy-Con. I don't know, though. It's always good. It's never gone down. It's never gone down in price. So we'll see about that. Alrighty. Well, I'll save any other conversation for later this weekend. Obviously, I'll talk some more hoops. Maybe I'll talk some college basketball. And then, maybe I'll also provide an update on whether I start up Xenoblade X or not, which I would very much like to if I have the time. So, yeah, we'll leave it off at that for now. I lied. Recording this a day after on Thursday, March 20th. Today is the start of the NCAA tournament. So brackets basically have, if you are doing a bracket, which I am, which I talked about yesterday, essentially that should have been all kind of set up. Based on the results so far, it is the late afternoon, evening right now. I am not in a good spot. A lot of my picks have already gotten eliminated, and it doesn't look like it's going to be good. I sort of predicted that Georgia would go to the final 8, or what is it, Elite 8. They have already been eliminated, so that has not gone well for me, unfortunately. So, we'll see how the rest of the bracket goes, but yeah, I'm already in hot water, you know what I mean? I did kind of make some risky choices. I am happy about this one pick that I made, which was Creighton and Louisville. It's a 9-8 matchup, so it's not super crazy, you know what I mean? Like it's like not like it's not the same thing as like a 16 seed upsetting a 1 seed or anything like that, but still a little risky. And that sort of worked out for me. I think the big one that kind of was like the upset was like the Clemson, and I forgot the other team, but it's like a 12 seed or something like that. That was like a big upset. But yeah, it's hasn't turned out quite well, and I feel that's been the case for the last couple of years when I have made my brackets. It's the thing. It's like it's single game elimination, especially like the just college basketball being very unpredictable the way it is, and players like you need to kind of nail the first attempt There is no second attempt, so yeah, as I've talked about with single elimination, a lot is at stake. I don't know if you can really fully get a great sort of, I don't know, a great read on each team just based on a single performance. Is not the same thing as a 7-game series, right? Where, coaches and players can adjust after game one or whatever. So it's different. It's very different. There's also not really the same sense of like a home court advantage, right? Because the teams that do play, they don't play on they play in like a neutral area, on a neutral court. And obviously that can, depending on the amount of fans that are there, that can kind of persuade which side to maybe help aid them in their win. But I do think that there's a lot of these factors that you have to kind of consider when it comes to, I don't know, just sort of the full determination, the full sort of analysis of like a college basketball game. Because it's like you could have one player go off who has never done anything like that at all at that level. It might just never happen again, right? So it's that's just kind of where the excitement and stuff kind of comes from, right? But I think that it's cool. I think that's part of the fun of it. I don't know if how much of the games I'm actually going to tune into. I'll most likely watch the ones that are, once it gets to like the quarterfinals, semis. I know they call it Final Four and stuff like that, but once it gets to kind of the later stages of the tournament, I'll most likely watch, because that's usually kind of what I do, or what I have done. But I like last year's game, I don't even remember. It was like San Diego and UConn, right? And then UConn obviously won for the men's, and then it was Iowa with Caitlin Clark versus Texas A&M, I think, for the women's side. I did watch that one. That was a good game. But the men's one, I think was kind of a blowout, so it wasn't really as exciting. But yeah, so I mean, I'll probably kind of do that for both leagues. But I think that I mean, now that my picks have kind of dwindled over just like, it's so funny how quickly, like, it's like I'm not like particularly invested or anything like that. It's just more fun to be like, come on, I just want to like get like a nice little bracket going, you know what I mean? I don't know if I don't believe anyone's ever done like a perfect bracket before, but I do think that it is fun to kind of see how people make their choices or whatever. I ultimately it is kind of just a crapshoot. The best team, the team that ultimately wins is more likely like a good team, right? Because I don't know any NCAA champion that's like a 16 seed. I don't know. Maybe there have been. I don't know the history of college basketball all that well. But I feel that in the past it's like UConn wins again because they have a good program. They have students that have been a part of their program for a long time. They know how to pick. They have experienced like players and that kind of thing, and that sort of works out in their favor. And that might be the case for a lot of other universities and other programs as well, where they have a very good culture and everything like that. But it also doesn't if you want to kind of do the NBA comparison thing, just because you have a good college team doesn't necessarily mean that those players on those teams are going to translate into being good NBA players, because it's just a different style of basketball. There are things that maybe you can kind of exploit if you are in college. Like if you are a larger player, you tend to have the just like height advantage, and maybe you have just like an athletic edge that you can sort of use to your advantage. Like there are a lot of other things that I think work in college basketball. If you are like an older player, there are cases in which players that are like 23, 24, which is pretty old for a college player, will allow them to stay. That's just like a fully fledged player, and they might be considered the best player in college because they've gone through it, they've gone through the ringer, and they know how to just play the game at that level. But it just might not translate well to basketball, to the NBA. Because typically for the NBA, you want to draft like a younger player and then just sort of acclimate them to a point where they are playing like NBA level basketball. If you are bringing in a college player, this is very sort of my surface level reading of just how prospects and that kind of thing work like just sort of following the conversation that I was talking about yesterday. If you are already a part of a system that you are kind of accustomed to at the college level, and you've been in the system for a long time, for like 3+ years or something like that, it is probably more difficult to translate that game to the NBA professional level, because you are kind of already a fully developed player in some instances, right? Bringing in like a 25-year-old from college into the NBA and expecting them to be like a full-fledged like star is sort of, I don't know, it feels like it's pretty unprecedented, right? I don't know if there's like a lot of instances of that happening. Most like NBA superstars / just stars in general usually go into the league at a very young age, develop their game, and maybe sort of peak like, sort of midway through the career when they're like 26, 25, right? But if you are a college player who's already close to that age, it's like less likely to do that because you have less of like an acclimation period, right? That's kind of like my view of things. Like you want to, like, there's a reason why the NBA and certain teams are willing to kind of take risks on these like super raw and athletic players, is because they hope that they can sort of transform their game into something more refined, and that they can maybe contribute later down the line once they kind of, just better their, just become more skilled and more experienced over time. I mean, that feels kind of the case for a lot of things, right? Like if you just are a part of a system and like earlier on and you spend more years in it, then you can kind of become just a better version of yourself and a better version of the player than if you had started like later in I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of the case, I think, for sports. It's like you kind of want to try to, if you want to try to build a really strong, talented NBA roster, it's like you want to try to draft, and especially if you want to kind of incentivize or rather prioritize having a superstar level player, you want to try to get them like really young and develop them and that kind of thing. I mean, we're seeing that with like a team like Washington. They're not a good team, but they do have some nice prospects on that team. Obviously with Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, Bilal Coulibaly, like they have, they're all 19 to like 21 years old, which is super young, right? I think Sarr is still like 19 and he's been doing pretty well. He's been having some nice games. He had a nice game against the Nuggets is kind of the one that sort of sticks out in my mind, when Jordan Poole hit that crazy 3 to win the game. But I think that it's sort of like, Wembanyama, he's only 20. Like, it's just the younger the player and just like the more potential they might have, bringing them in earlier into the league and having them develop and just kind of grow with the game is sort of beneficial for a team's kind of success who's really trying to build around that player, right? So, I mean, obviously with the Spurs, it's kind of a very straightforward and easy to understand case because you are just building around someone like Wembanyama, who just, there's nobody else like him. But you can also kind of see that happening with a team like the Wizards and the Trailblazers too, right? Like kind of the leap they've taken from last year, from being, one of the worst teams, one of the weaker teams in the league for sure, to now where they might be, they're still kind of in the chase for the last play-in position, right? I don't know if they're going to be able to make it because there is still like a bit of a 2-game gap in between them and like the Mavericks and the Suns, right? But I think it would be really exciting, and I think it would be pretty I think it would be considered a pretty successful season if they do get into the play-in and play some, pretty relatively meaningful basketball in a sense, right? And then maybe try to sneak into like a playoff position. I don't know. I don't know if they'll be able to do that really, because they are still, still very young, led by, Shannon Sharp and like Scoot Henderson and that kind of thing. But if they are able to get to a point where they are playing meaningful basketball, it might be something. It might be considered a really great like development year for them. Just kind of essentially leapfrogging the position that they were in last year to where they are now, where you have some real potential with the players that they do have, right? I think the counter argument obviously is like maybe they're still missing one more piece. Maybe they just still need to kind of draft for one more additional player to add to their roster, right? That's like a whole conversation, right? It's like do you want to try to get into this draft and try to get one more piece, or is it more beneficial to try to develop and really see these the players that you already have in these kind of high pressure, high sort of these high level situations? Like I don't know. I think that's kind of maybe where is going to be sort of a difference between what like the management wants versus what maybe like the fans want, right? That also sort of maybe coincides a little bit with maybe the tanking situation. The Blazers clearly aren't tanking, right? Like they've clearly made a concerted effort to make a push to show up and really show out. It's sort of like, is it, for long-term prospects, for like the long-term kind of view and goals of like the Blazers, is it better to maybe just, maybe like do the best that you can, lose some kind of games down the line, and then again get like a potential top 10 pick. I don't know if they have the chance on that, because their record is not bad enough to be considered in like the top 10 draft lotteries. But I don't know, that just might, that's a whole conversation, right? Like I suspect that once once Steph leaves, we'll be back in the mix for drafting and that kind of thing, unless they're able to somehow make someone like Kuminga work. And I don't know, I just don't know if that's really something to really put a lot of stake into. But we're going to be back in that mix, one way or another. I suspect like every team is going to go through some bad stretches. I mean, we went through a bad stretch in 21, like 2020-21, when, obviously the COVID year and, Steph's injury and all that stuff, right? Kind of the years that we had James Wiseman. Obviously that didn't work out, but it happens. You know what I mean? There are too many, even the bad teams, like the already talked about like Wizards. Like there is a potential for them to make like a leap next year, right? And considering they're in the East, it's like much more. They have way more of a chance of making that leap into like playoff play-in positioning, right? I mean, if they're able to do that, if they are able to land like a Cooper Flag or someone like an actual, like a potential real franchise player, get that group together, that's going to look like a pretty like good team. You know what I mean? And so it's like you could absolutely see them, not becoming like a fully locked in playoff team necessarily, but then making a sort of a leap similar to like what the Pistons did this year, what the Rockets did last year, and kind of transitioning into this year. Like if you are able to kind of surround the pieces with some vets, which they already have done. I don't know if they're going to keep them going into next year with a Marcus Smart or a Chris Middleton, but it's like, that's like another conversation in itself, right? Do you want to keep those veteran pieces in order to help develop the youth, or do you want to try to trade them to get some additional picks and stuff like that so that you can kind of accumulate more of that? I don't know. But I do think that there is potential. They're still not going to be great because they are still super young. They're still an incredibly young team. But I do think that there is some level of maybe hope that just seeing some of the other younger teams make leaps, whether it was last year or this year, that could be them going into next year. And I like seeing that. I like seeing teams kind of, these bad teams being able to kind of overcome, just being stuck in the mud with their current positioning, right? Like, I don't know. It's some teams just have not had really a ton of success over the years, just because of just poor management and that kind of thing. I mean, you can probably look at a team like, Detroit was kind of in that position really last year, and I was just like, dude, this is just like a complete dumpster fire, man. It is just awful. But with little tweaks here and there, obviously with getting their coach and adding some really quality veteran pieces, they're very clearly in playoff positioning. So it's like, it's like you're not going to be stuck in it forever, but you might be if you aren't able to make the right sort of moves and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I think that's like that's kind of a thing about team development, like developing your younger roster and that kind of thing. I think we are seeing a sort of a blueprint though. I think maybe outside of like the Thunder, a lot of the other teams that have made leaps, whether it is again a Detroit or a Houston, or you could argue maybe the Blazers are a little different because it's not like they've had their sort of vets for quite a while. But you can look at, I don't know, Magic's a little different. They were still kind of young. I guess it just all depends. Like every team's like trajectory is a little different, right? But there are multiple ways in which you can sort of get better, but ultimately it does come with getting youth. It is ultimately about acquiring some younger, like really strong young players and developing them and that kind of thing. And yeah, we'll see what that kind of looks like for someone like Washington. I really do want to see them try to get back into, because it's been a while for them since they've really had really any sort of meaningful basketball in Washington, since like Bradley Beal and John Wall and that kind of thing. So I think it would be nice to see that franchise and that fan base experience some level of success. It's great to see, again, it's great to see Detroit be able to kind of do that as well. So hopefully these other younger teams are kind of able to kind of get into that mix next year, because it's like, do you want, this might just be kind of reiterating the same thing I've been talking about, right? But if you're a team like Washington, do you want to prioritize doing what you can now? And it probably will depend on if they are able to get like the number one draft pick, right? If they do get like a Cooper Flag, that will sort of, that's going to kind of propel them to maybe want to win. Like maybe they already got the player they wanted, but maybe if they fall short of like number one, maybe they get like number 4 or 5 or something like that. Maybe that will kind of give them the time to sort of reflect and maybe want to go for the draft again the following year. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions, a lot of things to consider. But I do think that outside of the obvious kind of playoff picture, which I've talked about quite a lot, looking at these developing teams and seeing the direction that they might be headed going into next year, I think is super interesting. And that sort of coincided with watching like the NCAA tournament and seeing some of the draft prospects on there. Is like, I think it's a really kind of fascinating way of looking at it, just seeing the ways in which maybe how some of these players might be able to impact and how they might be able to succeed in the NBA if given the chance. I think there's a lot to really look forward to, and I'm honestly kind of excited. It's weird to say this. I'm kind of excited to see what a team like the Wizards are going to look like. I still like Poole. I know he has some dumbass plays, and I know he's had some incredibly frustrating moments, especially during kind of the last year of the Warriors and that kind of thing. I get it. I understand that. But I do wish him a level of success. Like, I do, I don't know what his future is going to look like. Maybe he's going to be, like, a mentor of sorts. I don't know. Because he's not, like, young, really, anymore, right? He's 25, 26. So he's basically a vet at this point. So we'll see, how well he sort of is going to be as like a veteran leader to the team. But he could maybe potentially be a part of their future in a way, or if the Wizards kind of look at their sort of their young players and are able to determine that one of them is going to sort of, I guess like just sort of overtake Poole in kind of the rotation or whatever, you know what I mean? But he has been playing well this year, like outside of just that crazy game-winning shot he had. Just if you're just kind of numbers watching, it looks like he's had a pretty good year too. So I'm happy that he's doing well. I know last year he had some struggles with he even like stepped onto the bench and everything. Because he just was not playing well at all. This year, though, has been a really nice kind of bounce back, and hopefully that kind of translates to maybe something more next season. I also just kind of wanted to touch upon like a few other things regarding just like this the last kind of stretch of games that we've had. I talked about how there's just been a ton of just like buzzer beating wins and that kind of thing. That has continued. So yesterday, and I didn't watch all of these games. I watched the highlight of the Heat and the Pistons game, which resulted in Cade hitting a game-winning three, banking a game-winning three against the Heat to win it, which was pretty crazy. It was just it's just like that time where you are getting some really high level basketball, some really good, just quality basketball. Like a lot of things can just happen, right? Honestly, this is kind of like, I don't want to look, it's like the sort of the leveled up version of like a March Madness. Obviously it's completely different because the stakes are much lower. But the stakes do matter in a sense, right? If you look at a team like the Pistons, they are still kind of gunning for a potential fourth seed, or they're in the mix with the Pacers and the Bucks as one of those teams, which I think is very interesting, right? And then the Pacers, which also played yesterday, I watched kind of the very last few minutes of the game, and I almost turned it off. I was just like, okay, it looks like the Mavs are gonna maybe pull off a little bit of an upset here, super undermanned. The Pacers didn't have Halliburton either. And yet again, they pull off the Pacers pull off another miracle win, where they were down by like 7 with a minute left or something like that. And after some crazy stuff, it reminded me the scrabble to get the ball and to get a shot off, where Siakam stole the ball, and the ball was just kind of like flying around, and eventually it got to Nembhard, who took the three to put them up by 1. That whole sequence was really reminiscent of last year's playoff game of the Knicks and the Sixers, right? I think it was game 2 where DiVincenzo hit that 3. Like it was super, like it was like very similar to that. I kind of want to do like a little like comparison between those two plays and how they sort of went down, because it felt really just like, I was like, I feel like I've seen this before, you know what I mean? Deja vu a little bit. So It was really funny though. I was just like, like when that happened, I was like, I feel like this is gonna lead to the Pacers getting the the win. You know what I mean? That's just kind of how things go. But yeah, crazy game, really entertaining ending to that. And I think it's been, yeah, just seeing kind of like all of these like crazy, down to the wire games. It's like it's heating up, man. This is sort of, we're already kind of in playoff territory, right? Like even just outside of the play-in games, like we're kind of ramping up to it. I've talked about obviously the race in the West for playoff positioning and how crazy that still is. But I think that it just is going to be, there's still so much more that's left. Nothing has been solidified yet, right? I mean, the Clippers now have the 7th seed because the Wolves have lost 2 in a row. And so there's some changes there, which is a little annoying for me because I wanted there to be some more separation between us and the Wolves and the Clippers. But it's like the Wolves have fallen, but the Clippers have been winning. Super annoying, but whatever, it is what it is. And so all of that just combined is just been wild to try to keep track of, right? Obviously, I don't look at it like, I tried my best to maybe just like update it, at the end of the day and everything. But it's like I have to like refresh. It's like, oh, actually, this team is no longer in like second or whatever. It's like actually the Rockets are hot now. Now they're the 2nd seed again. I was sort of expecting them to kind of fall off a little bit, but that has not happened. Actually, it's been kind of the Grizzlies that have been falling back recently. So it's like, okay, now that's like kind of maybe the next target. But yeah, it's a lot of crazy stuff. So I think it keeps, as I've been saying, man, it keeps every day pretty exciting. So, on top of that with like, college basketball, which again, I may or may not tune into every day, but I will definitely check out the later rounds. A lot of just crazy. It is like March Madness. There is a reason why it's called March Madness. Maybe it's not, maybe for my purposes, it's more NBA, more NBA slanted, but I can absolutely see the appeal of this season and all of the crazy sports stuff that are happening. So, I mean, if you're a fan of basketball, now's the time, man. Now's the time to really get into it, whether it is college or not. I do think it is worthwhile to really kind of compare the game of college versus the NBA. I think here's the thing. I think the issue, I think, maybe is going to pertain to some of the things that I've talked about in the past, where just the product of the basketball, the entertainment product of the NBA is like diluted because of how many ads and stuff like that is on the screen at all times. And I think that kind of takes away from the pure enjoyment of the game, right? I think with college, it's maybe less so. Obviously, you still get a fuck ton of ads, but I think it's, because there's like 2 halves and whatnot, there's like less breaks. It tends to keep the games going a little bit more quicker. The games are shorter too, so maybe that kind of lends itself to people maybe wanting to watch more of that. I don't know. That's a whole another thing though. The Warriors are playing the Raptors, which I mentioned. They're playing the Raptors tonight. I'll check it out. I'll try to watch some of that if I can. I really hope that it's a blowout. I really hope that we take care of business. That's kind of the situation as of now. I did want to talk about maybe a little bit. I don't know if maybe I'll save this for this weekend. I'll probably actually I'm gonna sort of combine today and yesterday's recordings, and I'll just probably post this later tonight. But I did want to talk about a little bit about the I watched a Mickey 17 last weekend with some friends, and I have some thoughts on that. I do think there are some interesting things and topics and just sort of themes and stuff like that to take away from the movie. So I think I might just hold on conversation for that for now. But I mean, I would just say it was all right. It's probably one of the weaker Bong Joon-ho movies that I've seen. I think I feel some of the I want to get into it, but I just, just timing wise, it's a little hard. Just like a brief thing that I'll say for now, and then maybe I'll get into it a little later. I think there are some aspects of it, whether it's in the script or in like the performances, that are maybe sort of lost in translation because of like sort of Bong Joon-ho's sort of direction with it. Like, it did feel very much like a Korean film adapted for American audiences, right? Just sort of some of the comedy was very like, just sort of like the I don't know, the comedic bits, just sort of like sharply contrasted with the more serious ones. It's like, that's a very like Korean cinema kind of like attribute, you know what I mean? It's like, if you've seen other movies of either Bong Joon-ho or other Korean movies, like, you have that, like, you have very sharp like tonal shifts between the comedy and the more serious moments, right? Like, that's just a very kind of clear stylistic kind of choice that they make, right? And I think for some people that just is like, oh, whoa, it's kind of a whiplash, right? Going for something more serious to something that is like sort of meant to be funny. There's some like dark humor in this movie, but that's also like contrasted with like some of the more serious moments as well. So it's like, and I get that there's like a bit of like a tonal dissonance maybe for some audiences. I do think it's maybe just more of a kind of a, just like, translation error is not the right word, but maybe just like a cultural sort of shift that's like a little difficult to really, put it on the screen. So I don't know. It was all right. It was cool. It was a cool movie. But I do think that, just like my biggest issue was like the pacing with this movie. There were some scenes that were just like super slow, and I'm like, we just got to keep it moving. You know what I mean? Like, we sort of get the point of it, and I think it's I think some scenes just sort of overstayed their welcome and that kind of thing, right? But it is what it is. Maybe I'll get into it later, more of it later this weekend, because I do think there are some things to kind of pick out of it and sort of delve into a little further. But anyways, that's going to do it for now. I will see what I will be doing, and if I'm able to kind of squeeze in some time this weekend to record. I would really like to talk about Xenoblade X, which has come out, which has released. I will be picking up the game either tomorrow or Saturday, which I'm really excited for. So I would like to kind of talk about that once I get into it. But who knows, maybe something exciting happens tonight or tomorrow, which I'll delve into. But for now, I'll leave it at that, and save any other further conversations. That's going to do it for this episode. This has been Save the Semantics. Signing off.